Greetings ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's Reddit series video from the subreddit HFY, called Human Rights, Chapter 8, written by Puzzle-Headed Charge 4. Yesterday, at 0330 GMT, the natural ground of the Conrory-held planet Qua, Lord Tra'and, representative of the Zelask High Command, and Overspeaker Zelaspur, designee of the Zelask Council of Code, signed the Act of Armistice with the United Nations. General Alexander J. Arakpov, Chief Staff of the United Nations Supreme Military Command, and Admiral William C. Fletcher signed on behalf of the United Nations. Hostilities will officially end at 2300 GMT tonight, Human Galactic Standard Tuesday, March 9th. All territories under the occupation are to be released as soon as practically possible, and arrangements for all repatriation of all prisoners of war to begin immediately. This is a monumental moment for mankind. It is the moment of both jubilation and of grief. None of us have come through the spire, now mercifully ended, unscathed. Even as we exult in the end of the unspeakable bloodshed and destruction, we mourn everything and everyone that we have lost. Making this day even more difficult, even more complicated, is the fact that the treaty is an armistice. It is not in the traditions of many of the nations under arms to accept a termination of the conflicts other than surrender or death. Some are already voicing the concern that a permit any end other than unconditional surrender only prolongs the conflict of leaving another way to fight, sometime in the future. Let me say now that I believe that this is not the case. Humanity has come very far since its beginnings. We wage war with ships that are faster than light. Our missile loses more destructive power in a single detonation than all human conflicts up to this one, and our soldiers take ground on planets whose existence our ancestors never dreamed. Commiserate with their advance, we must adapt with their political ideals. This war began with an unprovoked, unexplained attack. Intelligence was eventually obtained that the cause of Belai of the Zelask was the fear that humanity was a dangerously aggressive species, who posed a dire threat to their very existence. They formed this judgment after learning about some of our lamentable episodes in our history, discovering from us the depths of depravity which they never imagined. That they were wrong, that they were hasty, that they did not act with the complete knowledge of as those they attacked, is now apparent to both of our species. It is with contrition, then, that the Zelask have extended humanity the hand of peace. So now, as all the guns fall silent, we wonder what we have won. What we have won for ourselves is a place on the galactic stage. By the valor, ingenuity, and perseverance of our armed forces, of all nations and specializations, we have proven to every race that holds a secret of traveling faster than light that we are not to be trod on. We are more than capable of defending ourselves and more than capable of protecting our own precious human rights. We have won for ourselves a new ally. The Zelask have a concept which I practiced pronouncing on the way here, but which my aide informs me I'm still sadly unable to correctly say, that translates as brother of blood. This concept is a sacred one. It means that two enemies, discovering each other to be equals in honor, but aside their differences in the recognition that they continue to fight, would be the destruction of which they sought to preserve. The Zelask, in their message for us first requesting an open negotiations, stated that the observations of humanity convinced them that we are the brothers of blood. They will no longer raise arms against us, or permit others to. Everything is changing. Now that we have emerged from the trials of war, we face the perils of peace. All resources of our vast territories have been bent towards a war effort. Now they must convert from guns to butter. Millions of people in uniform will be coming home, seeking new lives that they have earned. We must make place for them, especially as many are not returning whole. Different nations will think proper different responses, and already internal conflict is rearing its familiar, hateful head. We must learn to work with our new ally who faces the same challenges we do. However, one thing will never change: indomitability of the human spirit. We will rise to the occasion as we have always done. As it is here that I must address a difficult topic, the wounds of war have just begun to heal. It is only human nature for us, goaded by their pain, the feel of resentment towards the Zalask. There are many arguments that could be made in favor of this emotion. The only one I feel is worthy of being addressed is the idea that we scorn the memory of our dead by concluding peace with the species that made the ultimate sacrifice to defeat. It is my personal belief that this argument makes very critical error. I cannot know the motivations that existed in the hearts and minds of millions who gave their lives, but I believe that they did not act so nobly as for a petty cause as political dominion. I believe that they made their sacrifices for something far grander, far larger. Our dead died that we might live free. The Zalask, with a great species-wide conception of honor that has elicited the respect of even the most stringent of their critics, have ceased to be a threat to us. Our rights are secured. We are free. Our honored dead did not die in vain. Therefore, to make our society worthy of the terrible price paid to preserve it, we must rise above the baser inclinations and go and greet our newest friends, the Zalask. As I conclude, I ask all of you to believe in a higher power, as I do. Offer that thanks to humanity has emerged from this tremendous ordeal. Colonel Robert McQueen flicked off the data screen and rubbed his eyes. So, at last, the day had come. Peace. His leg twitched, and he applied himself to a difficult task of straightening his knee. The doctor said that the ligaments were snarled tight from the extensive scar tissue, and that surgery to remove it would just make it grow back. He'd thought about having his leg amputated so that he could replace it with a better one, but there were so many people in greater need than he. He had learned to live with the pain. Maybe now he'd get an opportunity. But first, he had to inform his prisoners that the war was over. He'd never seen or heard of his brothers of blood tradition before. Not really surprising, it's not something they'd extend to be shamed. Almost all of his knowledge of the Zalask came from the being their prisoner. He learned about their code, their honor, the harsh and uncompromising way that they saw the galaxy. There hadn't been cruel, no beatings, no interrogations, no reprisals, but they had gone right up to the line. They fed their prisoners just enough to prevent malnourishment, denied them blankets, mail, anything not strictly necessary to maintain life. Then they reacted with horror when their prisoners broke loose in droves, making good an escape wasn't easy in an interstellar space. Plenty were recaptured. The Zalask retreated them as they were insane, straitjacketed, and solitary. McQueen hated them, so he learned everything he could about them. It was his defiance, how he continued to fight. The better you understood your enemies, the better you were at resisting them. Eventually, he led one of the successful escapes. 5 men jumped the wire, 3 made it to the cruising scout corvette, McQueen dragging his useless leg. He healed, but not enough for comfort, and with his knowledge of the Zalask language, they made him a commandant of a prisoner of war camp. When he received his orders, he'd wanted to refuse. He didn't trust himself to be in power over the creatures that had made him feel less than human. Let someone else, someone who didn't have memories of life in a cage, be responsible for them. Then, drinking alone one night, he remembered a quote from a speech dimly recalled from a history class. And, even in our sleep, pain which cannot forget falls drop by drop upon the heart, until in our own despair against our will comes wisdom through the awful grace of God. He could not control what he had done to him, but he could control himself. He decided he really should be grateful that he'd been captured. It had taught him one hell of a lesson about what it meant to be human. It had taught him humanity was a choice, and that it was more capable of making that choice than he thought. He supposed that sort of insight was wisdom, or at least the beginning of it. He understood why the grace that gave wisdom was awful, and he knew how valuable it was. He knew how badly humanity needed it, and his duty hadn't ended with being captured, and it didn't end with escaping. He heard of a sudden, drastic shift in the Zalask treatment of prisoners. Apparently some Navy captain had been crazy enough to yell at the Zalask about the Geneva Conventions, and he'd actually listened. McQueen still didn't know why they'd done it. Maybe they feared prison riots. Maybe it stung their honor that animals behaved better than they did. But it didn't matter that they'd done it, or why. It didn't change what he had to do and how he had to do it. When he was recovering, a nurse had told him that there were two kinds of people in the world, those who thought, I don't want anyone to suffer like I suffered, and those who thought, I suffered, why shouldn't they? She told him to decide which kind of person that he wanted to be. He made his choice with the same determination with which he decided to escape, with which he reclaimed his humanity. He reported for duty as the commandant of POW Camp No. 29. McQueen's prisoners were what he'd expected at first, conforming perfectly to the strictures of shame. He did his best to make them feel comfortable, to offer them opportunities he wished he'd had. He didn't really expect the Zalask to take advantage of them. He knew now strong their beliefs were. Then, something started happening he didn't expect. He first noticed it with a purple-eyed young prisoner wearing an infantry uniform, asking a guard to help data scanning a letter, breaking about 5 rules of shame simultaneously. Even stranger, the guard and the prisoner had obviously conversed before. It turned out the prisoner had been writing to a relief fund to request a sketchpad and the Zalask version of pencils. He had no idea that the Zalask had the art of any kind, let alone that they were so good at. And whatever it was the purple-eyed prisoner had, it was contagious. Soon enough, they all wanted art supplies of one kind or another, and it was mildly disconcerting to see the general level of excellence. However, their art seemed confined exclusively to various techniques of drawing, no other mediums, visual or otherwise. The commandant had cautiously asked the purple-eyed prisoner, a young male named Duran, about his drawings. The Zalask had tentatively replied that the code encouraged a constant study and evaluation of one's environment, since drawing generated an intuitive understanding of objects and their arrangement. All Zalask were taught to do so, to the same standard and competence the code demanded of all endeavors, and, he added in a smaller voice, drawing was enjoyable. It was shocking that shamed were willing to venture beyond the traditional restrictions like this. He had observed and done his best to sympathize, to learn about the prisoners the way his captors had never bothered to. McQueen came to think of them almost like children away from home for the first time. They were free to explore if they so desired. Now he wondered if they might become much more similar to humans than they initially appeared. The potential was certainly there. But first, they had to not kill each other. Easier said than done. First, he had to tell the prisoners that the government had concluded the armistice. First, humans, the most irrational, emotional, grudging bastards yet produced by the Milky Way, had to play nice with their enemies. He had to laugh. I wonder if this can work. The problem isn't them. If the code says coexist, they'll coexist. The wild card is us. What can we do? Can we even have the capacity to do this? It was too good of a day to feel doubt for long. The relief of the war being over was transcendent. The knowledge that all of his friends and families would see tomorrow, would see a whole, free, untroubled. The lifting of worries of war was liberation, and how every soul had exulted liberation. There would be time enough for doubt later. He never believed himself to be an eloquent man. He felt his speech to the prisoners was terribly lacking. He watched the luminous Zalask eyes glowing like a field of LEDs, concealing the nervousness. The way their brightness was used to convey emotion or attention included nuances far subtler than most humans could follow. And while he understood much of it, he knew he had more still to learn. "Sir, when did you say that we would be released?" The speaker wore a fleet uniform, his jade eyes glinting. It was the most normal tenor of reaction McQueen had received from one of the prisoners yet. He had to hide his surprise. "It's a little uncertain at the moment, as you can imagine, with the complexity and scope of the situation, but it looks like sometime in the next period," he answered. "And will we be allowed to stay here until then?" the bomber pilot queried, the fuchsia pupils now dimmed to a normal conversational luminosity. "Yes, of course," McQueen replied, somewhat startled that his prisoners thought that they would be thrown out into the cold to fend for themselves until the fleet came to collect them. Even stranger, the Zalask seemed satisfied with the answer. There were a few other questions, all of them concerning some logistical issue, such as whether written messages would still be scanned home, they would, whether relief shipments would continue, they would not, and whether they would be allowed to bring their pillows with them, if they wanted to. Finally, one of the senior officers, a tanker, raised his hand with the sharp points and light flared into the dark orange eyes, an expression McQueen knew indicated deep concern. "I remember your message to us when we first arrived here," he began, tail flicking. McQueen noted that he had said arrived instead of was brought. "You explained to us the human view of our situation so that there would be no misunderstandings. I do not wish to presume, Commandant, but I wonder if anyone has taken a similar courtesy to explain to you the implications of brotherhood of blood." A few other Celasks swished their tails in agreement. "We have only been told that it is a sacred status and that it requires the most conscientious attention to the duties of an alliance from both parties." McQueen responded carefully, worried that he would strike some hidden nerve. The Zelask was still extremely enigmatic, and he didn't know the intricacies of what had to be an extraordinary contingent state. The tanker nodded. "Yes, that is correct, but I feel you should know that this is a very great mark of acceptance. Your strange notions of honor have been deemed worthy, is the only word that comes to tongue. Your culture is so different from our own that I doubt that I shall ever begin to understand it, but it has been recognized as civilized under the code. Zelask may share in it, adopt from it, immerse themselves in it if they so choose, without infringing upon the code." His tail swept slowly from side to side, like a cat deciding whether to pounce. "I think you have already observed an effect of this change. Your eyes are dull, but they see much. You have noticed that we speak to you without shame. This is because your honor permits it, and as our brothers, your honor is our honor." The tanker paused, his eyes dimming and brightening in a pattern McQueen recognized reflected decision-making. "I know you humans doubt much. It is a consequence of dealing only with each other for so long, without the guidance of the code. So, I will say this, you need to have no doubt of us. The code is clear." There were rumbles and murmurs of agreement, and McQueen sought frantically for something to say in response. "My species spent millennia wondering if we were alone in the universe," he began. "This development had two contradictory effects. We were initially very suspicious, but once we give our trust, we bond very deeply. I hope you will be able to have patience with us while we adjust. It is only our nature." He ended with a statement with trepidation. He didn't know how much of the inevitable human nonsense the Zelask would tolerate. He didn't know if it would be grounds for withdrawal of the Brother of Blood status, or even if it resembled hostilities. "Yes, human nature," the tanker almost sounded amused. "I imagine that we shall soon arrive at a good understanding of that, at least. We already know the fundamentals and have a fair idea of what to expect. Your Geneva Convention says much about who you are, the kind of creature they needed them in the first place, that recognized the need and acted to correct it. We expect to see behavior reflecting all of the stages of humanity from you in the coming time." He sounded hardly bothered. McQueen had to laugh again. "I have to say it is very reassuring to see you so confident." "Well, we have received many rather startling proofs of validity from your human notions. Personally, the most convincing was that you were correct in your claim that you could attempt escape without insanity." "Oh yes, Commandant, I know your record." The Zelask flipped his tail in a grin that the human would have been called a crap-eating. "I decided to watch you. Under your laws, I was responsible for the well-being of every Zelask interned here, and I wished to ensure that you were, competent. If you humans can do this, as you say, then I believe that you can do other things for which you claim to have the capacity." He sighed. "I feel badly for you. Really, we have the code to guide us, to take every step of the way through these changes. You have nothing but your nature and your odd, disorderly ideas. I would wonder if that would be enough, if I did not know better." The Zelask looked up at the sky as though the future was written there. "The code brings intense simplicity to the intense complexity of life. You humans are nothing but complexities, all fighting each other and yourselves like a nest of mud snakes. We have much we may learn from one another. I personally may now admit that I was always drawn to your idea of escape. It seemed to me that if you were brave enough to defy your captors, you would have redeemed yourself. What being could turn its back on such a chance? And now we all have been redeemed. I do not know what the future holds for us. I do not know which of your doubts shall come true. I do not know what crimes the code breakers amongst you might commit. I only know this. The tanker raised his voice. "The Zalask, who uphold the honor of sentience, have allied with the humans, who pursue the honor of sentience." He sliced his tail through the air from above his head and slapped the dirt. "Our differences are unimportant. We are brothers in blood now." McQueen wondered if such a thing wasn't too good to be true, if this was really meant to be. Humans could adapt extremely rapidly, but some parts of them evolved at a glacial pace. Many still harbor deep prejudice towards members of their own species. How would they accept a totally different one? Well, the president said it best. Everything is changing. McQueen put aside his worries and dismissed his prisoners to the business of writing the news to their families. For now, it was enough that everyone was going home. "Dear Mom and Dad, we'll be leaving next week. They're taking people in order of the camps were established, so we're lower down on the list. I'm holding you to taking me to Angus's. I can hear the sirloin calling my name. It seems like forever ago that you all said you'll take me when I got back. I just can't believe it. I just can't believe it. I'm coming home. The war's over, and I'm coming home. Things are mostly under control here. We're all real antsy to get out, but everyone's pretty on board with release in order of seniority, so nothing's been too rowdy. The Commandant is visibly mildly pleased, which for him is equivalent to fainting from rapturous happiness. The news article was actually a little right. I was sort of involved in this last deciding to be brothers of blood thing. I'll have to tell you about it when I get back. I know it's still early in the process, but it didn't take me long to think over what you asked me. I want to stay in. The war's over, but that doesn't mean the Navy isn't needed. If they'll have me, that is. They might not want captains who destroy their own ships. It was a good day when we got the news. The guards were very confused about why we were all up the roof. Apparently, we feel like it and we are not explanations they're familiar with. We figured they'll be a lot more used to it before long. So, I guess I'm all done writing for the moment. It sounds like a game of mutant football's getting going, and I owe Ramirez one for last time. Your loving daughter, Charlie. Respected mother and father, I hope you will not be offended by my writing to you. I've been so long amongst the humans that I've started to acclimate to their ideas. I know how difficult it must be for you, trying to adjust to such a great change so rapidly. But our brothers of blood are right, and as the proverb says, honor must never be studied. I feel worthy to write you because I've been pursuing honor in the manner of our brothers. I'm so excited to see you and Sasha and Zelly. I thought that I would never get to again. We will be evacuated to human weeks 1 period from now. They are repatriating camps in order that they will populate it, and we are low on the list. They have the most amazing plans here. I've done some sketches so you might see as well. I love you all so much. Your son, Zarska. End of chapter. And that, my friends, concludes this video. I hope that you enjoyed. If you did, please consider supporting the author from the link down below. Otherwise, if you wish to support this channel, there are numerous ways to do so, like liking, subscribing, and possibly even becoming a patron. Otherwise, the easiest way would be to share. And until the next video, I hope that you all have a good one, and I'll see you then. Cheers.